everyone, Amer here with another Mission Impossible episode review. This time I've got Season 2, Episode 20, which is called The Counterfeiter. So Jim gets his instructions from the same firebox as we saw in the Slave episode from earlier this season. This is purely recycled footage with a different voiceover from Bob Johnson in terms of instructions. The mission: put doctor-turned-drug counterfeiter Raymond Halder out of business before he can put out his latest fake medicine for vascular disease. We get the regular team, plus surgeon Dr. McConnell for this one. During the apartment scene, we see some gadgetry which causes vertigo through ultrasonic waves, and also a laser which can cause blood vessels to burst. We cut to Halder shutting down production at his warehouse as Gant Pharmaceuticals has announced that they will be reissuing their Dilatrin in a different form. Jim, as a federal agent, bursts in with officers Willie and Rollin to shut the place down. Halder's glasses are knocked off and replaced with IMF prepared ones. Halder says he doesn't know anything about the operation or that the drugs were counterfeit. He was just there to get a good deal on some drugs, so Jim allows him and his assistant Eddie to go, taking the rest of the people to the police station. Jim exits as Barney and Dr. McConnell look in from the roof above and climb inside, quietly setting up equipment. Eddie stays behind to keep an eye on the warehouse, and we have a bit of a tense moment as a wrench falls, alerting Eddie, but it's dismissed as just rats roaming around. Halder attends a seminar from Gant where Cinnamon presents information about the new tablets and new techniques for preventing copies. He starts to show the effect of the new glasses, which are giving him a headache. Cinnamon offers to help Halder determine if the tablets he's already purchased are real or fake, and Halder offers to buy her dinner with a potential job offer. Jim visits Halder in his office, telling him that he's willing to make a deal to look the other way, as his job as a Fed doesn't pay all that well, and Halder is glad to accept. He also indicates that Rollin needs to be taken care of, and thanks to Willie across the street using the vertigo beam, Halder has a bout of dizziness. Greedy cop Rollin offers to help Halder further by setting up Cinnamon later that evening to help him with his plan. Cinnamon is brought over to Halder's apartment later that evening after dinner, and Barney manages to quietly get under Halder's limo. A traffic cop tells the limo driver that he's in a no parking zone and he has to move, so Rollin is forced to step in as a senior detective and tells the cop to let the car stay where it is. Barney adjusts the sphygmomanometer, yes, that's a real word, in Halder's bag for later. That's the blood pressure measuring device in case you're interested. Rollin heads up to the apartment, tells Cinnamon she's under arrest for possession of narcotics, finding a locker key in her coat. The three of them head to the bus station and a whack load of amphetamine is found. Not exactly narcotics, but we'll talk about that later. Halder tells Cinnamon that Rollin will forget about it if he's paid $5,000, which she of course doesn't have. Halder offers to cover it and more if she gives him information about the new Dilatrin tablets so he can start making them before the real ones are issued. Cinnamon says she can't bring herself to do it, until Rollin puts her in the back of his police car and is about to take her in. Halder pays Rollin off and makes it clear to Cinnamon that he meant what he asked for. Halder's warehouse personnel are bailed out and back on the job, with Cinnamon overlooking the proceedings. Cinnamon signals to Willie, hidden up in the rafters, who starts pointing the vertigo beam at Halder intermittently, and he gets Eddie to go get his bag, also telling Cinnamon to call in sick to Gant, which she does, alerting Barney that it's almost go time. Halder takes his blood pressure and finds that it's seriously elevated, and the laser causes him to have a burst blood vessel, bright purple, near his temple. Rollin instructs the ambulance to take Halder to one of his own clinics, where he's never been. Halder instructs Eddie to get rid of Cinnamon and make it look like an accident, but Eddie suddenly finds himself surrounded by the IMF. Doctors McConnell and Barney tell Halder that he'll be okay as long as he starts taking Dilatrin right away. Halder predictably throws a fit and confesses that all the Dilatrin in his clinics are counterfeit, which is caught on tape. Mission accomplished. Okay, I'm going to give this episode the only grade that I can bring myself to give it, and that is an F. I've heard feedback from some people that they actually do enjoy this episode because of their concern over the content matter, about how drug counterfeiting is an issue, and it's a dangerous issue for people who are dependent on getting proper medication. I don't disagree in the least, okay? I don't. Yes, it is a serious issue. Leaving that aside, I'm just trying to judge this episode on its merits. I tried really hard on rewatch to find some merit in this episode, and I simply could not. This episode is a complete clunker. Let's start with the obvious, and then I'll get to some of the other more technical things. First of all, Edmund O'Brien, who plays Raymond Halder. He is the first of a few guest stars who were unfortunately towards the end of their careers, and in his particular case, his life. And he had difficulty just playing his role. I can forgive him that as a person. I mean, obviously he's a human being. And you know, it's unfortunate, but I don't know what else to say. He's just not a good adversary for this series. Many of the scenes are just absolutely painful to watch. You know, he had a lot of difficulty reading his lines. He had to read his lines, like, I believe I read that it was almost to the point where, you know, they had to be like written, like people had to hold up papers for him to you know, it was almost to that point, which again is very, very unfortunate. But this is just not a great episode at all. I can't say that enough. The ending is telegraphed from miles away. You know exactly where this is going, almost from the very beginning. The idea for this story came from the wife of one of the writers, who thought that this would be a good idea. I guess out of deference to his wife and wanting to do something for her, the writer said, yeah, let's go with it. They made the best script they could out of it. But the script is bad, and the writer should have felt bad for subjecting us to this. This is not good in any imaginable way. Moving on to some of the technical stuff. There, you know, for a show that's all about drugs and medicine, it's supposed to be, boy, there's a lot of things to pick apart with that. Let's start with one of the most obvious things. Rollin charges Cinnamon with possession of narcotics. Well, in the bus locker that they find amphetamines. Amphetamines, I'm sorry, they're not narcotics. Okay, that's just one thing. Now let's get to the big thing. I am not a doctor. Okay. Absolutely not. I have had a little bit of medical training, and this is something that, you know, before you think that this is not something that, you just don't really care about what some people are going through. Well, I'm sorry. I take medicine for blood pressure every day. Okay, so I do know a little bit about this. This is not medical advice. I'm not a doctor, as I said, so I'm not trying to speak authoritatively about this. But because in the same vein as this might be sensitive to some people, it's sensitive to me, because portraying this as something that is completely incorrect is bothersome to me. The talk is about something called primary vascular disease, which is not actually even really a thing. You can have issues with hypertension, that's high blood pressure, which I am currently under treatment for myself. But primary vascular disease is not even really a thing. Okay, what the writers are kind of going for is kind of simulating the effect or the what should I say? You know, the characteristics of somebody who might be having a stroke, especially with the bright purple marks that come in, like branching blood vessels on Halder's temple. That doesn't happen, okay? That's not the sort of thing that's going to cause you a stroke. That's superficial. A stroke is something where you get a problem with the blood vessel, a primary blood vessel in your brain, okay? That's what that is. Not something visible. When Halder takes his blood pressure, he says it's 250 over 101. Maybe if you're a giraffe, but I'm sorry, a human being does not get blood pressure that high unless they have been doing some ridiculously extensive exercise, and even then it's going to come down to a regularly normal level. Even myself, I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but I mean, having sustained high blood pressure over 140 or 150, you're generally going to see the effects of that. Even if we say that this is kind of a one-off and suddenly Halder has what's called a hypertensive crisis, which is actually a thing. I did a little bit of research about this. If you're having that kind of severe hypertensive crisis, as they are simulating in this episode, you would not be treated with ordinary drugs that you can get from the drugstore. Okay, you're not going to get anything that's going to be available for widespread distribution. It would only be the sort of thing that you could get treated for at a hospital, probably in an emergency room. Okay, and the reason I point that out is because the only way that you're really going to make any kind of serious money over drug counterfeiting is if you can counterfeit reliably something that is available for widespread distribution. They mention other things like penicillin. Okay, if you were to counterfeit penicillin and distribute it all over the world, I can imagine you might be able to make some money off of that because penicillin is widely available and widely used. I get it. But for the type of thing that they're portraying here, it's just absolutely wrong. And that's just, for me, a little bit of a microcosm just to get across the point that there was just so little thought put into this episode at a wide level and also at a detailed level. A couple of things that I will note, certainly not just in a matter-of-fact way. This doesn't make things good in terms of what the episode is, but a couple of things I will point that are accurate. I thought I heard somebody or saw somewhere where somebody mentioned, how is Halder still running his clinics if he's no longer a doctor, if he lost his license? Well, it turns out that you can do that. You do not have to be a doctor to run clinics. You don't have to be qualified in any sense to run a business, to do a certain thing. You can do that. I can buy clinics. I could buy a pharmacy and I could run a chain of pharmacies. I could do that, even though I'm not a pharmacist or I'm not a doctor. The only exception happens to be lawyers. You cannot buy a legal firm and, sell, I guess for lack of a better term, offer legal advice to the public and be a partner or an owner of such a firm unless you are a lawyer yourself. If you're a business owner, you could have a lawyer who works for you, but offering your services to the public is not allowed unless you are a lawyer. So that actually is accurate, and it is possible that Halder could still run his clinics as a business, even though he's not a doctor. Last thing I will point out that is accurate. There's a bit of confusion about why they can't just, send Halder to jail for what he's done, for drug counterfeiting or whatever, and they're kind of getting him on tax fraud, especially since at the beginning of the episode, Dr. McConnell actually points that out. Why don't you just pick him up and send him to jail? And Jim mentions, well, his clinics report every penny. The clinics are run perfectly above board. There's no tax fraud there. But at the end, just because it's not very clear, I feel it's not very clear, what Jim says is that Halder basically confessed to selling the counterfeit drugs at his clinics. And he did not report that income, right, that he made, that would have been made through the manufacture and distribution of those drugs. And that's where they're going to get him, Al Capone style, on tax evasion. Anyway, I don't want to belabor the point about this episode anymore. I watched it. I had to watch it as part of the series. It wasn't pleasant. And I'm going to stick by my grade of F for that. Please like this episode. Please subscribe to my channel. Please leave your comments. If you choose to disagree, I quite understand. If you enjoyed this episode, if you like the content matter and the way that it was portrayed, that's fantastic. I have no problem with that. I'd love to hear from you, whether you agree or disagree with me. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.